everyone, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Dr. Christy Eaton. I've worked in mental health and education for nearly 25 years and have a special interest in the wellness of school personnel. Today's module is entitled The Multidimensional Aspects of Self-Care for School Personnel. For the purpose of today's discussion, school personnel include all of those individuals who come into contact with students: principals, school social workers, bus drivers, custodians, cafeteria staff, librarians, classroom assistants, school counselors, school nurses, school psychologists, and all those who serve the needs of children in a school and school district each day. Everyone has an impact on children during the school day, each in their own way. Our objectives today are threefold. First, I want to help you understand the various dimensions of self-care and why self-care is so important. Second, I want to help you take some time to assess your own current self-care practices. You may be engaging in a few good practices, many, or like me when I began this journey, very few at all, and that's okay. Once we can recognize honestly and accurately where we are in our self-care journey, even if it's at ground zero, we can much more clearly complete a self-care plan that is doable and meaningful. Before we move to the next slide, I want you to take special note of the graphic on this slide. I was very intentional about putting it there. We all play many different roles in life besides educator. We play the roles of partner, spouse, child, coach, housekeeper, cook, taxi driver, and so much more. It's important to take care of ourselves and keep our gas tanks full, so to speak, in order to fulfill all of those roles in our lives. If I was a car and didn't stop and fill up my gas tank on occasion, what would happen? Well, I'd run out of gas, be stuck on the road, and be pretty much worthless to myself and anyone else who needed a ride. This situation aligns very well with self-care. We absolutely, positively have to take time out to care for ourselves by refueling our tanks. It is not selfish, it is necessary, or we run out of fuel and are of no help to anyone, including ourselves. You can't successfully educate and care for students over the long term if you don't care for your own needs first. Considerable research has been done of late to determine the reasons educators identify feeling such a large amount of stress. So much so, in fact, that teachers are leaving the profession at a rate of about 45 to 50% in the first 5 years of teaching. That doesn't mean they are changing schools or school districts. They are leaving the profession altogether. Did you know that school personnel, ER physicians, firefighters, and police officers all report similar levels of stress on their jobs? Yes, you heard that right. Educators are experiencing the same amount of stress as those first responders who face death, crisis, and life-threatening situations on a daily basis. It's really a sobering thought. So as you can see in this slide, there are four main sources of educator stress. Problems in the school organization, such as lack of support, poor leadership, and negative school climate. High job demands include the pressure to have students perform well on high-stakes testing. It's extremely frustrating as a teacher to know that your students are facing abuse, homelessness, and a myriad of other life stressors, which may impact their ability to learn and perform on standardized testing, and know that as a teacher, your performance evaluation and raise may be determined in large part on how your students score on their tests. It's stressful. Anyone who has worked in an urban public school knows that teaching supplies are not only limited, but that it is generally the norm for educators to use their own personal money to fund classroom materials and activities. In one particular elementary school where I worked for several years, I was given a supply of copy paper that was to last me through the year. I had to take my copy paper to the copy machine to make copies, and then remove the paper until the next time I needed it. Of course, I never had enough copy paper for the school year and was always buying more. Not having the most basic supplies and textbooks makes an already difficult job even more stressful. Lastly, social emotional competence is one of the biggest sources of stress highlighted by school personnel. Why? Because students often come to school with limited social emotional skills, mental health challenges, and/or high levels of trauma, and their behavior reflects it. Student behavior can be extremely challenging for school personnel. Research demonstrates it is highly unlikely that school personnel are given the opportunity to take even a single college course on classroom management or how to incorporate social emotional learning into the curriculum. So why self-care? Well, besides just making you feel better about yourself and life in general, it has some other really big benefits. First, when you're feeling well, your capacity to work with and care for family members, friends, and colleagues is much improved. We all know that when we are stressed, we are not at our best and certainly do not have the capacity to fully engage or care for those around us, including our students and fellow educators. Another key benefit is that of overall health. As we study the neuroscience of the brain and the impact that stress has on the brain and physiological system, we know that reducing stress is a great way to ward off health problems such as headaches, gastrointestinal problems, anxiety, weight gain, high blood pressure, and even heart attack, to name a few. Self-care contributes to lower levels of stress, which mitigate health problems. There are 6 dimensions to self-care: personal, physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, and professional. Self-care is commonly thought to include basic activities such as eating well, getting enough sleep, and exercising. And while these are all necessary components, self-care is much more comprehensive in nature, as you can see in this slide. We will briefly review each of the 6 dimensions in the upcoming slides. Please note that I'm not going to bore you by reading all of the self-care activities listed on each slide, but rather highlight a few for you to consider. Personal self-care is about setting life goals and reducing stress by managing your money. Creating a budget and sticking to it can be a great stress reducer. Whether we are just starting out in our careers or nearing retirement, setting goals for ourselves and achieving them can bring about great joy and satisfaction. I've mentioned physical self-care briefly already. Self-care is often equated with the physical self-care activities you see in this slide, such as eating well and getting enough sleep. But what about putting the screens down and taking time for a vacation, even if it's just a short weekend away? Have you tried engaging in less screen time or planned a night away with your partner? One of the very best self-care activities, in my humble opinion, is right here in this slide: saying no. Do you have the courage to say no? Do you realize how freeing it can be to say goodbye to the guilt and skip the party or event that you really don't want to attend? Are you able to say no without feeling like you owe the person you're saying no to an explanation? This takes practice and planning and doesn't come easily to us. However, I encourage you to think about those activities that don't give you joy and say no to them. I promise you the world will keep spinning on its axis, and you will be so grateful to have the extra time to engage in those activities that do bring you joy. Emotional self-care can be uncomfortable for some. Expressing strong emotions in our culture is not always accepted, which may make emotional self-care a bit more challenging for us. We also tend to be our own worst critics. Instead of putting yourself down or harshly criticizing yourself, what if you instead spent time engaging in some positive self-talk? Say to yourself, for example, I'm a loving parent, I'm a caring person, I communicate well with the parents of my students. Reminding yourself of all of your strengths rather than all of your shortfalls is a wonderful way to take care of yourself emotionally. Spiritual self-care means many different things to many different people. For some, it may be involvement in an organized religion and regular church attendance. For others, it might mean donating money to a worthy cause or volunteering at a local soup kitchen or food pantry. It may mean reading or writing poetry or listening to music. I encourage you to take time to explore and get in touch with what moves you spiritually. Work can be a great source of stress for us. Don't forget to plan actively for how you can take care of yourself at work. It might mean packing your lunch each day so that you don't have the stress of running out to grab something, as if you have the time anyway. It might mean coming in to work 15 minutes early to do some relaxation breathing in preparation for the day ahead. It might mean chatting with colleagues about an upcoming event or asking them for help with a challenging student. One thing I know for sure is that part of self-care at work is leaning on your trusted colleagues when you need to and returning the favor when you can. It's a win-win for everyone, including the students. This slide is simply another helpful visual for you to see the 6 dimensions of self-care and some of the activities that can be included in each dimension. It's a good place to look for ideas and a good visual of how all 6 dimensions really serve to create a full balance of self-care. Now that you have had some time to think about all of the dimensions of self-care, please take some time to access this link and take your own self-care assessment. It is for your eyes only and will be a great help as you begin to create your own self-care plan. With your self-care assessment now complete, please take some time to create your own self-care plan by filling in the 6 boxes on the slide. You can do this on paper or on your laptop or however you choose. I would suggest including in your self-care plan all of the things that you already do to care for yourself, assuming they are valuable to you, and then add any you have learned from today's module that you think might be helpful and enjoyable for you. It's a great idea to include at least one activity from each of the 6 self-care dimensions. This is a fluid document and yours to change as you like to make it meaningful and work for you. I check mine daily. It's a good reminder that my self-care is important, and I would encourage you to do the same. Congratulations! You have completed the module, and more importantly, you have completed a multidimensional self-care plan all for you. Take care of yourself. Your happiness and your well-being are a priority. Thank you.